Jason, I've sat with you the last 2 days, and as we've gone through these discussions, it's been fascinating to see your observations. You're the one that's different from all of us. You know, this isn't your world. And I'm curious to, what impression do you have? What's your instinct to what you've seen and heard the last couple of days? I know you gave us a little bit, but a little bit more. Sorry, Chuck.
I hear a lot of frustration when I listen to most of you people talk. You have a lot of good ideas. You see the problems very clearly for the most part, but are stuck with bureaucratic blockers. I was talking to someone, I can't remember who, Colonel something, yesterday, an Army colonel. I can't remember. But, you know, we're talking about, oh, we need to do this. It's all we need to, and because of bureaucracy, because of this or that, it's not happening. And I can tell you, I know why it's happening. Things are blocked because you don't need to have a solution. In World War II, you need to move. Things are happening. It's so critical that those creative people will come up. There's not enough critical need to be creative and just let the field do what we do, because there's not a need for that, really. We're not in a crisis. It seems like we're in a crisis because people talk about crisis all the time. But there's not millions of lives being lost every month somewhere right now. And there's like, oh my God, you know, there's horrible things happening. But that's, again, like I said, it's the perception. People are attacking us with how we think. And if the enemy, whoever they are across there, terrorists and doing all these terrible things, they have a simple narrative. They're enlisting people from all over the world just with simple ideas. And we need to have simple ideas to defeat them. And I totally agree with what Harry was saying before. Having that strong religious people, and even then, people were like, "Oh yeah, but you can't do that because if we do this, it's fundamentalism, and we're going to go on." No, it's not that. It's like you need to believe. The group needs to believe in something, in one thing that you can communicate clearly. That's super important for a group to believe in that, and that's the narrative of that group. So when I see that, it makes me very nervous. I feel like that's how they could defeat us, is by splitting us all into little micro factions, micro tribes. It's very dangerous.
You know, you talk about the power of believing in stories, and obviously there's also the power to use stories to get people to believe. And so these are very powerful tools. So what's your vision for how we can use these tools? Because the challenge is, right, if somebody's telling people a story that's working and you don't like it, that's called propaganda,
yeah.
Right? And if we're telling a story we like, but other people are concerned, then it's like brainwashing, right? So how do you think about this from what you've learned, video games, what you've learned to be able to convince people of things in games? How do you think about these? Because I couldn't agree more that we need a narrative, we need a story, or else our life often doesn't have meaning, and you've really highlighted that nicely.
It's exactly that. I think with, and I wrote it down. Hold on. I was taking so many notes. And it's very good. General Palmer, I believe, over there. I love that. I always listen for how people say things, because as a writer, I love that. And he said, as an infantry guy, all right? That's saying, I have this experience, I carry stuff. I know what it's like to carry heavy gear. I know what it's like to do the work, go out in the field and make it. And he's used that phrase several times, because that's his narrative. I'm an infantry guy. Anything above 0 is good. This is someone who's used to having tools that do not work, obviously. And I understand that too. In what I do, yeah, it's better than 0. If it works in any way, I want it. So I totally get that. You know, when people say brainwashing, propaganda, yeah, you can use stories to brainwash people, and you can use stories for propaganda, but you can use religion, our stories to motivate for good reasons. It's the application and the morality behind it that makes it brainwashing or not. But believing people, you can say, oh, it's brainwashing, maybe. But if the message is good, it's good. Harry.
You know, it's curious to me. I have many kids, and they love to play video games, particularly the ones that fire and shoot and do all of those things. And they're very disappointed when their dad tells them, I'm somehow a second-tier military guy because chaplains don't carry weapons, which he was, you know, my boys are very disappointed in. Anyway, it's very interesting because of video games and movies. I would argue they are the books of this generation. They have a tremendous influence. And I'm wondering about, so, you have the morality portion of your games. Do you feel any compulsion, or is there any kind of governing body that looks at it and says, hey, we want to reward people who make moral and ethical decisions throughout the gaming? Or is it strictly that you look at what is the most interesting thing, and potentially, since, in this particular Western culture, violence is elevated to not, a small g god. Is it the sale that is the most important, or do you feel an ethical responsibility to create a storyline that is moral and somehow teaches the people who are going to play something valuable?
Me personally, or the industry?
You can go either way.
Well, me personally, yes, I do. I mean, most of what I do is give a reason, a context. Why am I doing this action? There is, it's violence as sport. That's what people are enjoying when they play video games most of the time. It's a skill. It's a riskless way of living a fantasy in most cases, and it's very violent. And I do think of that. Is that good or not? And maybe it's not. It's definitely different in a movie, which is a passive experience. Games are active. We actually have to be less violent than movies can be, because when you're controlling it, it's that much more disturbing to do stuff. So you'll see things in movies that you'll never see in a game. It would be too uncomfortable to do that stuff. So we need to be aware of it. But I mean, what we're doing essentially, the idea is it's entertainment. But entertainment changes how people think. So it's a very powerful medium, and there's not any kind of controls in place to do that. Even when I was talking to Todd yesterday, he goes, "Oh, do you have an ethicist working with you?" No. I mean, I can deduce what that is. I couldn't define it other than someone who's in charge of ethics and making sure you're doing the right thing. I don't know, but that's it's the writers, it's the designers and stuff. And one thing I would when I was hearing yesterday, measuring. I could do a whole talk on just on metrics and what games do. I worked on a multiplayer game for 3 years, and it's all about metrics. Measuring, where were you? Where did you shoot? How much ammunition did you use? Where were you? What was your reaction time? Where did people die most often? All these kinds of, and we call them heat maps, and you have all these things, and you can modify the layouts of your simulations to play to those weaknesses and make sure that people aren't exploiting and all this kind of stuff. So I mean, the gaming industry is very good at that. Using information to then track. What I've noticed a lot is it seems like the tech is what problem are you trying to solve? I'm seeing a lot of tech, and I was like, what is the problem? Is it trying to carry more stuff? Well, if you're carrying more stuff and it's hurting people, that's not helping anybody. So to me, I saw a lot of the stuff, and I'm wondering what it is, and what video games has that I think you guys don't have is a whole trade of people like myself, design-oriented people. They're not engineers. And they're not artists. They're people. Designers are primarily concerned with humans. How is the human going to interact with this product? How do they understand? How do they learn? In games, we're constantly teaching people. Stories are about initiation, testing, mastery, which is what you want to do when you're training someone. You want to initiate them to a new thing. You want to test them. You want to get good results, be able to baseline them and see how are they improving. What is the problem? I was talking to someone else yesterday about just some tactical strategy games, and going, hey, let's create a simulation and get a group of people together and decide what you're going to do, where you're going to move the infantry, where you're going to move the tanks, what's going on. And I was even thinking to myself, yeah, but how does intelligence come into that? How does the supply chain of going, where's the stuff coming from? What are the spies telling me? What do I know about what's going on? Because in Delaware, without the spies, you don't know that they're having Christmas because they're mercenaries and they're just chilling. They think there's no way this ragtag army is going to come across the river, but you need intelligence to do that. How does that factor into these simulation games? I can't think of a game that does the spy element well too. So there's so much stuff that computers could help by providing simulations and helping decision making, as I was talking about with Todd. Dr. McFate.
Oh, well, I used to play a game called Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
And, after playing that, you walk down the street and you think, I could push that little kid over and take his bicycle.
Yeah.
And it definitely has an effect on your mind and how you perceive reality. And of course, I would never push over a little kid and take his bicycle, but you start thinking that way after you play a game. And So my question really is about social engineering on an individual level, and then extrapolating that out to a social level. Because games, I think they change your neurocognitive processes to a certain degree, and then if you extrapolate that out to the society at large, what are the effects that we're looking at, both on the individual and on the larger system that we live in, the culture?
I think we're grossly underestimating how much that's true. People with the phones now, I mean, I'm 44, I can remember no cell phones, I can remember 3 channels. I'm Canada, 5 channels, CTV, CBC, but ABC, CBS, NBC. I mean, I grew up with a few channels. Now everything, it's micro tribalism. Every channel, everything in its place, and there's no shared culture anymore. And we wonder why people don't even use the same words, because we have no shared experience. Television was great at creating a shared experience, perhaps was false, but at least there was. Everyone had a shared, at least entertainment. Now it's super specialized to even different kinds of cartoons that only certain people like, and the games totally affect your brain. I mean, I totally believe it. Just working in video games has changed how I think, and I can confirm General Palmer's research. Absolutely. And I got in when I was 29, so I guess I was almost at the 35 and up where nothing can change, but it has changed my thought process enormously. It's a very dynamic, very fast, very ever-changing thing, and I find that I wish people would stop and think a little bit, but things just happen. Where here I'm getting people going, we have all these ideas, but we can't get anything approved, we can't do anything. So it's like I'm in the middle of that. I want people to stop and think a little bit about what is the impact, what is the effect on people, because it can be very, very profound, and it's a very powerful medium because of the interaction. It's not just watching, I'm taking actions, and that reinforces, I think, behavior.
I just had a thing that we could probably relate to some of the things that we were talking about earlier, especially yesterday. A lot of the conversation centered around reintegration and whether or not augmented or enhanced soldiers would still be able to relate to the cultures or societies in which they are operating. From a game development standpoint, on one level, I think that boils down to sort of maintaining this level of humanness within the character, and I think you guys tackle that in 2 ways. One, we see the divide that you guys have created between the augmented soldier and the naturals, quote unquote, and also you guys need to ensure that there is that level of humanness that is maintained so that the player still relates to the character that they are vicariously living through when they're playing the game. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you could provide some insight as to how you reconcile the divide between the augmented and the naturals and what we could learn from that experience.
I had a lot of, fun to think about in a sci-fi context. Who is this terrorist organization that we're doing without religion coming into it, or thought just people creating such fear because of this event, the AUG incident, and then creating a group who did absolutely nothing wrong. They have no belief system to be oppressed, but they are oppressed because people are terrified of it. And this creates, again, tribalism and just putting stress on these people and imagining, I'm doing a simulation in my brain, imagining how they would react. I even made fake propaganda posters inside the game. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there's some UN charters basically saying it's illegal to be exiled, it's illegal to be detained, and using that and saying, hey, the UN is basically going to vote on this in our game, and look, you're breaking your own vision, you're breaking your own laws by putting us aside and separating us and stuff like that. So we didn't even tackle that topic. I was presenting it as a problem, going, here, look, fear will override rationality all the time. Emotion overrides logic in humans all the time.
Some people have heard this story before, and I'll just beg forgiveness on that because it'll illuminate my question, which okay. I want to reapproach the concept of narrative, as we'll call you an expert on narrative. So once upon a time, I was a mild-mannered person just hanging out in a small town of Kingston and found I was going to Iraq. At that time, the narrative that I understood of the Islamic State is that it was actively crushing all resistance and on the verge of winning. And so I thought of that and said, well, I'll go and try to do my part, and maybe we'll have to fight our way out of Baghdad, but I'll do the very best I can. Only to get to the actual operation and find, no, it's quite the opposite. The Islamic State is being crushed by particularly the Iraqi army. And it got me looking at what is narrative. And how do we fight that? And you made some earlier comments, and yet what I saw strategically was an organization that was very, very effective at telling their version of the truth. And at times there would be small tactical narrative battles whereby atrocities were accused against one side, the other side would fight on social media. That would spin up to the tactical level. Sometimes at the strategic level there'd be feedback, and it was all interactive. But it was all about telling the story of who's winning, what is the superior kind of society, and yet we don't do very good at that in the West. Although there are some experts here that do that better, I think we as the West and perhaps as democracies are distinctly uncomfortable with trying to prove our version of the truth. The Ministry of Truth failed in a book, or at least it was written in a book, and we're greatly resistant to democracies to creating some type of organization that can broadcast propaganda / our version of the truth, and yet we're fighting right now against another very capable opponent that's very prepared to do that. So I'd be very interested in your comment, both as an expert in your field, but equally as a Canadian. What is the level of comfort of us trying to debate and fight for what is the truth, or what we believe to be reality?
I would start by saying they have a solid why. You guys are invading our country, we want you out, they want to destroy our lives, and we're going to get them out of here. Our objective over there is to promote stability, maybe. Is it to create a democracy, but maybe they don't want a democracy? What is it? It's super abstract. It's not like someone's invading a country that's an ally of ours, we want them out of that country, and then we want to restore balance. It's so abstract, and people would, I'm sure, give you tons of different answers. That's part of the problem. We don't know why. People have different reasons to go. And I think we're very focused, I think, from my observation of you guys anyway, on how. What are the tools we're going to use, ways and means? What are the tanks? How are we going to train the soldier? But what's the objective? To me, one of the big things, the critiques I have for you guys, what are you trying to do? I want to augment soldiers. For what purpose? I was very inspired by, I think the general, what was his name? Mike? Yes. Talking about the flat structure and training those guys to go and do specific things. And what gear did they have? He's saying they got good radios and they got light arms. You know, they're going up. That's who they're fighting. And creativity is going to come from lack of resources. When you don't have a clear objective and you have too many resources, that's when you have a giant bureaucracy who can't decide anything, because you just have too many solutions. You don't even know what the problem is, and people on the field are then forced to improvise and deal with what they have to try and, because they can assess the problem. And there's so much information we have access to, but I think less knowledge, because it's so dynamic. You can't plan for it. It becomes harder and harder to plan because it's so quick because of the communication tools that they have. You know, everyone's got mobile phones. You have instant communication with all over the planet, instantly knowing what's going on, sending out messages and moving things around. It's very, very difficult to keep up. How does intelligence keep up with lightning fast stuff? It's terrifying. I don't know how you guys do it.